joined by Tristram Hunt, who's the Labour candidate for Stoke Central, competing against 11 candidates this year in his constituency. So Tristram, Stoke Central has been a Labour seat since the constituency was created. Would you say that being selected for parliamentary candidate with no real ties to the area in terms of family or having a residence here or any background, do you think that those factors still make this seat a safe seat for Labour? Do you think that because your candidacy you're still safe?
Well, I don't think any seats are safe at the moment, given the nature of politics, what we've seen with the Lib Dem bounce, what we've seen with the very febrile nature of politics. But I don't accept there's been no connection with here. I've worked closely with the Wedgwood Museum, for example, over many years through the Heritage Lottery Fund, securing investment there. I was one of the earliest and strongest advocates for the Staffordshire Hoard to come back to the Kingdom of Mercia, to come back to the Posh Roots Museum. So I've been involved in the history and heritage of this great city for a while. But there's no doubt I wasn't born and bred here. I am a relative outsider. But very few people raise that on the doorstep. It is a question during a general election about what Labour can do for the people of Stoke and what I can do as their representative in London as a strong voice, a national voice for Stoke.
Okay. Mark Fisher, who was the who was the MP before you, who served the city for 27 years. Now, it's quite a relatively long time to be an MP, especially in this area. He's had a lot of deep roots embedded in this area over that time. Could you see yourself 27 years from now doing the same job in this area? Would you be prepared to move here and stick it out for that long?
Well, I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement, Mark's time here in over 27 years, and you're absolutely right. He's built up this extraordinary amount of goodwill because of the work he's done, and I'd very much like to follow that model as an assiduous constituency MP, delivering for the people of Stoke-on-Trent, keeping the council on its toes, but also working in Westminster for them. So absolutely, you want to be part of the community and serving the community.
Okay. Would you move here though? Would this be your main base? Because obviously you are living in London, so.
Well, what I'll do is make a family home here. I've got a wife and two small kids, so we would divide our time between here and London.
Okay. You said that if you want a seat here, you'd make the Labour Party's presence much more stronger. Realistically, though, what real evidential changes are people going to be able to see should they come to another election and say and feel, oh, I'm glad I voted for Labour again? What's going to change drastically? What do you think under a Labour government people are going to say, I'm glad I voted Labour in Stoke Central this year, last election?
Well, they're going to keep their Sure Start centres open, which is very, very important for young families, for isolated mums on some of the estates, such as in Bentley. Brilliant Sure Start centre there. They're going to see 250 million quid going into their secondary schools under building schools for the future. Once we get the council to sort out the final element of the jigsaw, that money's going in. That's not secure under the Conservatives. You're going to see the investment continuing in the new hospital, the first new hospital in Stoke-on-Trent for 140 years delivered under a Labour government. So you're going to see the great advances of the last few years continued, and you're also crucially with me as MP going to see a much stronger focus on getting private sector investment, jobs and businesses into Stoke.
Which brings me on to my next question, which is, Stoke High Street itself is a pretty grim place to be. It's hard to argue otherwise, I believe. If you look at the amount of shops that are closed, over 50% of the shops are either empty or just left or boarded up. How are you going to make Stoke an attractive area for investment, given the fact that this area has, not to say a bad reputation, but a reputation that's been left by the wayside? How are you going to make such drastic changes and bring this investment in?
Well, there are two issues. There's Stoke Town Centre, and then there's the Stoke-on-Trent metropolitan area. And I think with Stoke Town Centre, there are actually some exciting ideas coming out of what's going to happen at Spode and that extraordinary cluster of buildings there. And I think sort of watch that space, actually. I think there's some interesting regeneration ideas happening there, and I'd very much like to be part of that. I think more broadly, what we need to do in terms of regeneration is, sell and explain Stoke's great assets nationally, the brownfield sites, the transport connections, the distinctive heritage, the Peak District, all sorts of very attractive assets. But also we need to raise the education and skills levels. That is the problem in the city. 20% of the working age population have no formal qualifications, and that needs to change.
So how are you going to, through that, obviously the Stoke-on-Trent College is being built, but in terms of the two-school programme that's at risk, should we say, at the moment with the closure of schools in this area, are you pledging then to say that you definitely keep those two schools open?
Well, the issue is whether you keep the Mitchell High School on its site. And the Labour group is absolutely clear on this. We want the Mitchell High School on its site, but redeveloped with the money. So we want that as part of the community to increase skills and learning in the community. The money's there. The ministers in Whitehall say it's absolutely fine for it to happen, and that's our position. That's what we're arguing. Okay, so under your MP tenancy, then you'd say that they're definitely going to be two. No, because it's not my decision. It's a council decision. Okay. I will be one of many voices trying to bring force to bear, but ultimately, and I'm a great believer in local government autonomy. It's for local people to decide through their council representatives. But I will be one voice pushing. Moving on to the area and the politics in this area in specific terms, the EDL, the English Defence League, and the BNP. Are quite prominent. I mean, the English Defence League chose to hold a very large, violent rally in Stoke Town Centre, and the BNP launched its manifesto here. It's one of those things where you could quite easily say that this place, the Stoke Central as a constituency, is a hotbed for right-wing politics potentially. How do you feel that you're going to be able to reconnect with all those voters who see the far-right political parties as their only real choice in politics? Well, you have to explain to them, first of all, the consequences of their decision, which is that if you're voting BNP, English Defence League, and there's a great deal of overlap between the two organisations, you are putting at risk your job. You are putting at risk economic recovery. You are putting at risk the reputation of this great city, because what business will want to invest here, what company will want to come here, what teacher will want to teach here, what doctor practice here, all the professions and the skills and the businesses which we need will be put off by some sort of semi-criminal organisation such as the BNP or the English Defence League. So you have to spell that out, but then you also have to make the positive case for voting Labour, and also, help explain to people what is happening to their society and their economy. Extraordinary change in the pottery industry, the mining industry, the steel industry, at a time of globalisation and migration. And you have to explain to them that the solution to that does not lie with the BNP. How are you going to drum that in the respect that if you looked at a Labour government in this area, somebody could argue that the Labour government has caused them potentially with the economic downturn, they could blame the government and say they've lost my job, and the services have declined, public spending in certain areas has fallen. Which areas is public? Well, it's more of a council issue, but you could say that a Labour. We have to divide off council under a Tory leadership from a Labour government. Sure. Without generalising, though, a disenfranchised voter could very easily say, for you to say to them, well, if you vote BNP, it's going to cause risk to your jobs. How are you going to convince somebody though who's so disenfranchised with Labour, given, despite the fact this is a Labour stronghold? How are you going to convince somebody who is disenfranchised with the system because of what's happened relatively recently, and how the EDL and the BNP have almost made themselves a credible option? Well, they haven't made themselves a credible option. I think you've got to see they are fourth in this. They were voted fourth in the poll here at the last election. The margins. Their votes every election are going up in this area. The BNP launched their manifesto here. You can't really say that that the BNP don't see this area, especially with Simon Darby as their deputy leader standing here. It's a very clear. I'd say it's a very clear point that they're trying to make, that Stoke is where they feel welcome. As I've said, what you have to do is lay out the consequences of that decision. But we also, as a Labour movement and as a Labour Party, need to work harder. Yeah. So we need to be on the doorstep more. There are people we've knocked on doors in the last few weeks, haven't heard from a Labour canvasser in 30 or 40 years. So we need to re-energise ourselves, reorganise ourselves, and get on the doorstep more, and and hear the argument and make the argument. Yeah. Students in this area make up, in the Shelton area of the Stoke-on-Trent constituency, the Stoke Central constituency, make up quite a large proportion of the voters, because where we are, it's in this constituency. What issues are you going to address with them in mind if you were to become minister? How would you? Well, we want to grow this area. We want to grow the university quarter. Under the Labour government, there are 30% more young people going to university than beforehand. We're building the new sixth form college. We're investing in education and skills, and we want Stoke to be a place where people come for learning and education, and for this to be a vibrant, exciting place full of great professors and great students, and extraordinary facilities like the one we're sitting in at the moment, which is far better than many national newspapers and regional television centres I've been in. So you just need to see the emphasis which Labour gives to education and learning by looking all around you, and we'll be stressing that. But we'll also be, looking at issues of housing, of sports facilities, working very hard to keep the Shelton swimming pool open. There are all sorts of local issues which are of concern to people, and obviously, there are issues concerning maintenance allowance and grants and tuition fees, which we also need to, keep under review.
Okay, and finally, our jovial question that we have you tried a Staffordshire oatcake yet?
I have tried a Staffordshire oatcake with all sorts of fillings in and everything. There's a very good bakery in the Bentley neighbourhood centre which does some tremendous oatcakes.
Are you a fan?
I am getting there.
You're getting there?
It's an acquired taste, and I'm enjoying it more and more.
Well, when you start calling your wife Duck, then that's
I've gone from sugar to ducky, so I'm making progress.
Brilliant, Tristram. Thank you very much for joining us. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.